All right, welcome to WKNC. This is Abdul Najjar, and in today's episode of Connecting to Pack, I am joined by Beccy Schoden. Beccy is a student from Austria, and she is currently studying at North Carolina State University, doing an exchange semester here at NC State. Beccy is a fellow colleague of mine, actually. She hosts her own podcast, and she's very much involved with Technician, the student-led newspaper here at NC State. It's definitely a pleasure to have Beccy in the studio here with me today. Beccy, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So there's definitely a lot to talk about today. I'd love to. There's much I would love to explore with you. But first off, let's try to go over the basics here. So you're a student from Austria. You're doing exchange semester here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try to understand here the purpose behind this exchange opportunity. Why the U.S. and why go abroad in the first place?
Yeah, well, I've always loved to travel, so that was part of the reason. But also, like in Vienna, the degree I'm taking requires me to go abroad and study abroad, and I could list three choices, two of which were in the United States and one was in Australia. NC State was actually my first choice. So I was really lucky to get in because most students, they don't always get their first choices. Like a friend of mine, for example, she was studying in Europe. She wanted to study in Europe and she wanted to study at in Denmark. Can't really remember which university she wanted. Copenhagen. Yeah, it was Copenhagen.
Okay.
Copenhagen Business School, and she didn't get in. So it's really cool that I did. And I chose the United States because I've been to the United Kingdom when I was 15, so I studied there. It was a high school exchange, so I kind of wanted to see like the big brother, if I can say it like that. And I've heard a lot of really cool stuff about the United States and like the spirit, kind of like freedom and the American dream and being able to achieve stuff that you might not be able to achieve in Europe. Because they just have like a different mentality, you know what I mean? So Americans, they really believe that they can make everything happen. I was actually talking to one of my professors about that, and he said that from a very young age, Americans teach their children that they can make everything happen. They can be the next president, they can be an actress, they can found their own company. They can basically make everything happen. And that's just the kind of mentality that we Europeans, I feel like at least, lack sometimes. So coming here and being surrounded by people that actually empower you and believe in you is incredibly rewarding, and that was one of the reasons why I came here.
Wow. And what sort of, say, expectations you had before you showed up, and do you think these expectations truly matched the reality of what you're currently experiencing?
Well, like one expectation I had was that the food's going to be horrible. Because kind of in Europe, we have that, like we believe that Americans are not really good when it comes to like cooking and stuff and like, you know, really good, healthy food options. It's just
everything is deep fried, isn't it?
Yes, that's kind of what we believe.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised. Like we had an orientation week when we all came here, and what they offered was like fruits and granola bars and like really healthy options. Yeah. So I was really taken by surprise that they actually have that.
Right. Thought these things didn't exist in America.
I was like, no, you don't have bananas, you don't have strawberries.
Right. No, I was surprised by that as well. I think when I first experienced an exchange opportunity in the U.S., I had a sort of dining dollars or meal plan. I think that's the right word. And I just noticed when I would enter into these dining halls, a lot of the students are just, they're eating fries, burgers, tater tots, all of these things that are just not healthy. And I was taken aback by the fact that they can do this throughout, almost every day. It's just I like my body. It's just it can't take it. So I was really surprised to see that they're used to it in a sense. So that that was quite crazy.
And that is maybe like a really kind of controversial comment, but I was really expecting Americans to be like bigger.
Okay.
Okay. Like because as you said, they eat fast food a lot, and then what I saw is that a lot of Americans are actually really sporty and athletic, and they have like it doesn't really look like what they eat is unhealthy. All the time. They don't look unhealthy, essentially.
Right. Yeah. There does seem to be a large segment of the society that is into fitness and into working out. I think it's gaining steam, especially in recent years with influencers and with the advent of social media. People, I think, are more exposed and more, I think they understand more about what it's like to have a balanced diet, a healthy diet of some sort. So I think that's partly why. But let's so what sort of caught your attention, say, about college life here in the U.S. And obviously you're heavily involved, on campus with your podcast, which we'll explore together at a later point, as well as your involvement with student-led newspaper here. But essentially, what were one of the things that you truly enjoyed about the college experience and caught your attention?
Well, it was everything here, actually. Like when coming from Austria, we don't have any kind of student organizations or like student clubs.
Oh.
The only thing we might have is like something kind of politically organized student organizations of a kind, which is not really something I'm necessarily very interested in.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have a newspaper, we don't have a radio station, and we don't have a belly dancing club, or we don't have any of that cool stuff that you guys have here.
Right.
And growing up, I've always loved to write. I think I wrote my first story. It was granted, it wasn't a very news kind of story. It was about a mermaid, but still, like, it was my first story when I was 6 years old. And I've always loved writing, and I didn't have the opportunity to do that in Austria.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw that they had like a newspaper, I was like, yes, I want to get involved. I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Same goes for WKNC. I had my podcast before, and then I learned that they had a radio station called WKNC.
Mm-hmm.
I just showed up at the meeting. I got to meet all these people, and then I realized they were actually looking for a podcast content creator. And I was like, oh my God, that's such an amazing fit. And then I learned that they actually pay you for doing that.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God. I mean, this is amazing.
You hit the jackpot.
I hit the jackpot. Like in Austria, it's even hard getting like a job where you don't get paid,
Mm-hmm.
like something you just volunteer for. That's hard to get in the journalism sector.
Yeah.
And here, not only that you get that job, you get paid for doing that.
Wow.
It was mind blowing. So that was like part of the reason why I really wanted to get involved, just because you have so many opportunities that I could take advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
And I love doing it. I love being a part of WKNC. I love writing for Technician. I'm writing for like news, culture, and opinion. Every single section has like its perks, and I feel like I just love contributing to NC State and to Technician in a sense that I can actually help people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can write stories that are community based. For example, I covered PAG Essentials, which I feel like is a really important issue for people who cannot afford to eat, for people who cannot afford to live.
Right.
And that is what I essentially love about journalism and reporting, is that you can actually be a voice for people who are not able to speak up for themselves, to advocate for themselves.
Wow. I love the way you put it, to amplify voice of the voiceless and to give them platform.
Yes.
So this is one of the articles that you've written about those that are financially disadvantaged, if that's the right word to use, and who are in dire need of assistance. And what you did was you wrote about this initiative, this Pack Essentials, that's trying to provide or to it's a donations fund, right? They're trying to get donations to distribute to students, if I'm not mistaken, those that are financially disadvantaged.
It's a part of it. Yeah, there are different resources that NC State offers to these people, and the emergency fund is one of them. But there are also for example, there's an initiative, and that's actually the whole community in Raleigh, and they are trying to provide housing for people that cannot afford, because the rent's going up. It's getting really hard to find something like some place to live that you can afford. So these people are trying to provide students with housing opportunities where they can live for free or for very small amount of money per month. So
interesting.
Those are all part of the resources that NC State provides for students. And that's something else that I found amazing, is the how the community in Raleigh and the community at NC State is really trying to help people out and really trying to come together and help students have the best experience that they can possibly have, if you know what I mean. Even students that are struggling, NC State does not want students to struggle with financial issues. They want them to focus on school and university work, and to be able to ensure that they help them in as many ways as they can. And I think that is something that really took me by surprise, especially because in Europe, people think that the United States are a very individualistic country, and I'm sure in a lot of ways they are, but still they really stick together and they really try to help. And that's something I find really beautiful here at NC State.
Yeah, no, certainly I see that community spirit manifesting itself here at NC State, and there are many. I think there are many organizations here that truly want to help out, and sometimes you're walking into the student union and you see like a stand or a table with people advocating for a particular cause, a humanitarian cause, for example, and they're trying to do their best to get as much. Get as many donations as possible. So I truly see that, and I agree. Let's talk about the creative process here for a second. How do you approach a topic such as this particular one? The Pack Essentials. How do you come across these topics, and how do you know that this would be, say, worth covering over another topic that you come across? Maybe we can start by how you come across these different subjects that you want to cover.
It really depends on the section. For opinion, we pitch stories. So we just have ideas, and then we tell our editors, Justin and Sky, and we're like, I would like to cover that. Is that opinion worthy, if I can put it like that?
Okay. And
most of the time, they're really open, and they're like, yes, of course, go for it. You can do that. Yeah. And for news and culture, it's a little different. I mean, for when it comes to culture, you can pitch stories, but sometimes they will be like, okay, that's not maybe pitch that to news or opinion, because it's not really a culture piece.
Okay.
And then news is different, because news, most of the stories they give to us. So we're not really the ones pitching stories, but rather we're the ones taking stories that they thought about, like the editors. Yeah. So it's a little different with regard to what section you're working for.
Interesting. So you have a certain level of creative liberty, but that is constrained by what particular aspect of, say, the section, or what section you're covering. If it's news, they give you the topic, you're assigned a topic, but if, say, it's culture, you can pitch it.
Yeah.
Interesting. And is that an approach that you have found quite, is that something an approach that you think is the most appropriate for you, or what do you think might be, if there is any change that you would perhaps incorporate?
I think it makes sense that when it comes to news, they kind of have stories prepared that you can take, just because the editors probably know what's going on at NC State most, because they are just most involved in kind of the life at NC State and students at NC State. I would say, though, for like some maybe clubs or organizations, it would make sense to listen to students' opinions a little bit more, maybe when they pitch something, because they might be in a club or in an organization that they don't really have any experience with.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that they don't listen when you pitch stories. For example, I pitched one story about the new student ombuds.
Okay.
And they didn't really know what a student ombuds was. So they were like, yeah, that's an amazing story. Let's do that. I couldn't do it because I had already interviewed the student ombuds for my Pack Essentials article. So I wasn't the one taking the story, but somebody else did. So they are kind of always looking for people to pitch stories, but sometimes they would just be like, that it's not making a lot of sense to cover that for Technician, just because there's a different newspaper in Raleigh, and most of the stuff going on in Raleigh is covered by that newspaper.
Right.
So we really try to focus on NC State. So I would say I think the approach is quite fitting when it comes to news. An opinion is more like, you can be more creative when it comes to opinion, because it's essentially your opinion. You don't have to like look for that many. It's always good to have sources, but it's more like, really, if you feel strongly about something, you can put your opinion out there, if you know what I'm saying.
Interesting. And do you have say a preference when it comes to whether or not you enjoy Beccy On Tour more, or enjoy your work with Technician? If you don't want to answer that, that's fine. You don't want to upset your manager.
Honestly, I love both. I cannot give a preference, even if I wanted to, or if I try to. Like, I don't have a preference, because it's very different. Because for Beccy On Tour, I can basically choose my own guests. I can choose who I'm gonna interview.
Yeah.
And I can totally freely choose my own topics, which is also something I can do for opinion, for example. But for news, I cannot. Most of the time, I'm not choosing my own topics. But I like both, because, you get this input from Technician, from like stories that I would never have thought about. Like, for example, LinkedIn. That's an article that was published this week.
Right.
LinkedIn is a very interesting topic, and a lot of college students don't know how to use LinkedIn. So it was really interesting to kind of get to the bottom of what is really important when it comes to using LinkedIn. And I would not have thought of that as a topic to pitch or to talk about on Beccy On Tour. But for example, it would not make a lot of sense to, for example, interview an actress for Technician. I would need to frame it as to why I'm interviewing that certain actress and why it kind of relates back to NC State. Whereas for Beccy On Tour, I don't really have to do that. I can just be like, I would like to know her story and dig deeper. I think that's probably like the biggest difference between the two, is that for Beccy On Tour, I can actually go deeper. Whereas Technician, it's just one article, so I can never put every single thing they said into one article.
Okay, that makes sense. So, at first blush, I think when one of our listeners hears Beccy On Tour, they probably think, she's on tour, she's traveling, right? Maybe that's the content.
And I'm doing that a lot.
You've been doing that a lot. Okay. Well, Well, essentially, then, what is Beccy on Tour? You mentioned you alluded to interviews, but at the same time, I think there is a little bit of traveling involved. So, share with us in the audience what Beccy on Tour is all about.
Yeah, well, Beccy on Tour is very diverse, I would say. And I didn't think it would be like that when it first started off.
Yeah.
I never thought I would do interviews, for example.
Mhm.
Like, that was never something I had anticipated starting that podcast. It was just about me, like coming here, my observations, maybe the people I meet, and like traveling, stuff like that.
Yeah.
College gossip, I think, is something that I put in my description when I first started set up this podcast. But I realized that I think it's really interesting to not just hear my point of view, but also somebody else's. And doing interviews, you can just talk to people about their stories, their experiences, and that is so important, I think, because for people who might not be able to share their opinion or might not have a platform to do that, I just want to help them speak up about whatever it is they feel strongly about.
Yeah.
And in listening to my guests doing the exact same thing and telling them about their experiences and what they have achieved, I think it's encouraging people to think, well, that person made it happen, so can I. And that was something I really love about my podcast, or like the guests I'm interviewing, because they really convey that things can be done to my audience. And then with the traveling, I think it's just, so it's interesting to know what you can do, like when you travel to Miami, for example. I always try to kind of include like the different locations, the places I'm going, like restaurants and stuff like that. So when somebody wants to go to Miami or like New York or Washington, D.C. or like the Outer Banks or whatever, then they know, oh, yeah, I can go back to that podcast episode and just listen to what that person did, and, kind of like a blogger, like a travel blogger. So
yeah,
it really has these two sides to it and incorporate it in my podcast.
I love that. What would you say? What would you characterize as being one of the memorable experiences of your travels in the U.S. so far? What was memorable site or place outside or even within North Carolina?
I would say in North Carolina, or
maybe here, or maybe even outside of North Carolina, because you've been to different states so far, right? You've been all over. So
kind of, yeah.
To the tour.
Well,
yeah.
I would definitely say, and that I haven't talked about that yet in my podcast episode. It's probably gonna be next week. Was like Florida, Miami, and then Orlando, Universal Studios. Okay. I love that.
You're giving us a sneak peek here.
Yeah, I am. Kind of. So yeah, next week you're probably going to hear about like Universal Studios, Miami, all that jazz. And that was a lot of fun going there. Miami is a beautiful city. They have a lot of culture. They have a lot of art. Orlando is, of course, amazing and very well known for Universal Studios, which, of course, is an experience.
Right.
Also, Outer Banks. I love that. What I found interesting is the place where we lived. It was kind of like a small city in the city, in a sense. Like, okay. There were like houses, like, everywhere in a circle, and people living there having like their holiday homes, in a sense. Like they would spend their like holidays, vacations there, vacation homes. And they had like these huge American flags, every single house.
Wow.
So I was just like, this is like patriotism at a different level,
American patriotism.
Yeah.
Wow. So, we've covered a lot of things that you found interesting, a lot of things that you truly enjoyed and you found fascinating. But there must have been, I'm sure, throughout your journey so far, there must have been certain things that you found perhaps challenging, or maybe things that you're not fond of maybe an aspect related to, I don't know, like customs, culture. We don't want to be throwing some shade here, but I mean, maybe there's something that you found quite difficult to adjust to, or tricky to wrap your mind around. What would you say is something that falls into this category?
I would say it's not really something that has to do with culture per se or like any customs,
Mm-hmm.
but what I find challenging and hurtful, even in the sense, is that I've applied to a lot of different companies for internship opportunities in the media industry, broadcasting, print, writing,
Yeah.
news industry, stuff like that. And I have not heard back from most of them. And I do understand in the United States you need a visa, and it's hard for international students to get that visa and to get a work permit to stay in the United States. I do have something that's called can do something that's called academic training, which is included in my visa type, which is J1 visa.
Mm-hmm.
And most companies don't even give me the chance to explain my visa status to them. I do understand that they don't want to like do research on it because they probably don't have the time, but I would kind of expect them to at least give me the time or give me the opportunity to explain my visa type to them.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I do have most of the qualifications and skills they're looking for in a candidate. And the only reason why they're not taking me on is me being an international student. And that's something that's really been challenging because I've applied at least like 20, 25 times.
Oh, my goodness.
And most of the time, I haven't heard back. And, it kind of gives you the feeling that you're not good enough. And that is not something I ever want anybody else to feel like. And that was definitely something I found very challenging not being here in the United States.
I think that this could possibly be your the next topic of the article that you're going to write for Technician.
I already did that.
You did that?
Yeah, I did that.
Okay.
I did actually 2 of them. I did one that was targeted at like NC State students in the sense of that I was talking about like the career fair and how employers do not want to take on international students. So that was all incorporated in one article. And then also like the different visa types, I was kind of trying to explain them.
Yeah.
I also had it on Beccy On Tour. I had like one episode, and I did write a satirical article. Sorry. The other day, it was published this week about how to win an American's heart and the American citizenship, in a sense. Like, if you wanna if you wanna have something to laugh at, you can read it.
Wow, I really hope someone who's quite who's higher up, who can influence these I guess arbitrary. I'm sure I can characterize them as arbitrary rules. Maybe I hope that someone can read this or listen to it, hear your concerns, and maybe there could be a change in the future, so that international students like myself wouldn't have to go through this whole inconvenient ordeal.
Do you also need a visa, or is that different for you?
Yeah, as an international student, I'm on an F1 visa. So obviously there are so many restrictions to an F1, and a lot of things to consider, a lot of paperwork. Even when it comes to work, for example, I'm not allowed to, for at least one academic year, I'm not allowed to work off campus, and I'm not allowed to exceed 20 hours of work here on campus. So
same.
Yeah, it's this is triggering major discontent.
It does.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah. So I truly understand what that must feel like.
And I also don't really understand where they're coming from, because you would read like in when you go through all these job applications and the announcements and the candidate profile they were looking for, they would put somebody who has intercultural competence.
Right.
I mean, do not get me wrong, but someone who's been studying at Prague is the perfect example, because like what I've heard is that it's mostly NC State students, and these NC State students going to Prague do not interact with Czech students in the slightest. So,
Gosh.
I mean, not kind of trying to like, make out that program as something bad. I'm sure it's a great program, but like when it comes to actually interacting with Czech students, it's just not really something that's incorporated in that program. So even if you put that on your resume, it does not really show that you have any kind of intercultural experience or intercultural competence.
Right.
And then yet they're looking for that, but they're not taking an international student who has literally been raised and grown up in a different country, speaks a different language, sometimes even more so. Like I speak German, English, and I do speak a little French, which is not even a lot. Like a lot of my friends, they speak German, English, French, Spanish, Italian, or Arabic. So, I mean, there are like so many different languages that you can speak. So I don't understand, why wouldn't you take that person that has the skill set and has demonstrated the knowledge in that industry, and in addition to that, has that intercultural competence they're looking for. Why wouldn't you take that person just because they're an international student? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
So that's something that's really, kind of bugging me and annoying me about that,
Yeah, no, I really think that this is one aspect of our life journeys, us as international students, that should be highlighted more. I think we definitely go through so many struggles. Obviously, we're away from our families. We're taking on this journey of trying to pursue a better life, trying to pursue something of value. But at the same time, our challenges are things that we're going through, and I'm not trying to minimize the challenges of, say, our American peers. But obviously, we're taking in major risks, and we're trying to explore something truly different. We come from a different background. We have, I think, some advantage, but at the same time, we can't showcase or allow for our talents to manifest because of these different restrictions that are imposed on us. So I totally understand your concern, and I think I would be one of the proponents would advocate for a change in how the system is set up. So it's definitely annoying.
It's definitely needed. Yes, a change is definitely needed in that regard. And I hope that somebody in a position of power might actually be like an international student. You never know. And change these kind of things. And I do understand it's probably really hard for the government to change that. And the immigration laws, it's all very strict and very restrictive. So I have understanding for that. But yeah, I would hope and I would wish that they listen to concerns of international students more, and also looked at what they can bring to the table more.
Right, right. We definitely do have a lot to bring into the table.
Yes.
You yourself have that. I mean, you spent, I don't know, like three months now in the U.S. You've been very heavily involved with the on-campus organizations, with the radio station, with technician. That's quite admirable.
And I loved it.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I'm truly glad that you get to experience that. I just hope that this change when it comes to these laws would occur in the foreseeable future, so that you can exercise your talents even outside of the sphere of NC State. So I think your exchange journey is one semester, right? 1 semester in the U.S.
Unfortunately, yes.
Well, it seems like, yeah, I think it is definitely sad. But what would you say is an interesting or primary lesson that you learned from your stay here in the U.S., since it's coming to a close soon?
Toot your horn.
Choose your horn.
Toot your horn. That's something one of my professors said in my first interview that I did for Beccy On Tour.
Mm-hmm.
He said that don't be afraid to brag, not in a sense that you insult or offend other people, but
Okay.
you should not be afraid to talk about your achievements and show that you're proud of what you've done so far. Especially in the United States, that is very important that you remind people of what you can bring to the table.
Yeah.
That is very different from Europe, actually, because in Europe, especially in Austria, people really don't like when you talk about yourself and your achievements.
Oh.
And that is very different in the United States because, and people will not take offense if you do that. Like if you say, I have this and that skill and I have this and that experience and I work there and there. And that's why I would be the perfect candidate for that job. Somebody in the United States would be like, they would be expecting that. They would be expecting you to tell them that.
Yeah.
Whereas in Austria, people would be like, oh, she's just like a student. Why is she emphasizing that? I mean, like, why is she bragging?
Okay. I see how, okay. I see a difference here. That's interesting. Wow. How do you intend on spending the rest of your days here in the U.S.? When are you traveling? When are you? Wait, you don't have to tell me because it might even make it more sadder.
Well, I'm already sad, so it's okay.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
No, don't worry about that.
Yeah, what's the plan like for you?
To be honest, I don't really have that much of a plan. I just know that I have to leave the United States on January 16th because that's when like my visa's running out on December 16th. So I can stay one more month, like 30 days. So it's actually January 15th because it's 30 days. You know, that's what like that's part of the visa that you can stay 30 days before or after your stay in the United States when you do an exchange semester.
Okay.
So, and I need to move out of NC State housing on December 14th. So I will need to either find something else in Raleigh or I need to travel somewhere else.
Oh.
I was thinking Atlanta might be interesting.
Okay.
Maybe
it's an interesting choice.
Yeah, they have like a really lively and kind of big musical industry and arts industry, film industry. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And you can really maybe. I'm not sure if I'm necessarily gonna find a job there, but you can still like go to musical productions, theater productions, just have fun there, like travel.
Yeah.
Also like Boston would be interesting. So I'm not really sure, but I definitely want to do some traveling after I finish my exams.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I hope that would be an enriching and fulfilling journey. The rest of it. Yeah.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Well, Becky, it was a pleasure having you here. I truly enjoyed our conversation, and
me too.
Yeah, it's truly sad that you don't get to experience more of the U.S., but I'm hoping there would come another opportunity where you get to come back and maybe even settle down here in the U.S.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Thank you so much.